how to set clear boundaries in love. Boundaries, what are they? They are our emotional self-defense. They teach people how we want to be treated, and they keep us safe and sane. When you set clear boundaries in your love life, you maintain your dignity and you maintain your self-respect. You show your value as a person when you can say no to what doesn't work for you and yes to what does. And in today's video, you're going to learn how to set clear boundaries in your love life from the very beginning. Step one is get clear on what you want and need and what you will and won't do in your dating and relationship life. So I'm going to give you 4 examples of personal boundaries you set for who to date. Number 1 is a sexual boundary. An example of that would be, I will not sleep with someone until we are monogamous and we have shared STI tests. Number 2 is a worldview boundary. I will not be open to dating men who are very religious or not religious enough. So this is about your worldview. You set a boundary around who to date based on your personal needs and preferences. Number 3 is distance. An example of that would be, I will be open to dating a man who lives up to 100 miles away from me. And number 4 would be age. I will be open to dating men who are 10 years older or younger than myself. So we have to decide these things before we start dating. How open are you? What are your needs in terms of sex, religion, distance, age, or, even a person who has young children? If you know you don't want to date somebody who has young kids, that's another example of a personal boundary. What does not work for you is dating somebody who has kids who are still living in the house or kids who are under a certain age. Or maybe you're open to all men who have all different age kids. Personal preference. Step 2 is to clearly and kindly set your boundaries with the men that you're meeting and dating and in relationship with. So I'm going to give you 5 examples of boundaries that you set for him. A communication boundary would be no texting anything except facts and non-emotional information. You need to know that before you go into dating, because you're going to let him know, I don't text anything except facts. When it starts to get into a conversation that deserves a phone call or an in-person meeting, you set a boundary around that. Another example would be a sexual boundary. I am uncomfortable being touched or kissed before I have developed more trust in a relationship, or before whatever. So knowing when you want to be touched, when you want to be kissed, I'm not comfortable with that. Another example would be a time boundary. I want to meet in person or video chat after a few text exchanges. That's an example of a time boundary. We don't want to spend a lot of time on a dating app back and forth and back and forth. So if you know that, you've got to put a boundary around it. And then there's a boundary around safety and time, and that is around first dates. So saying something like, I want to meet for coffee or drink for a first date, not a 3-hour hike with a man I've never met before, or a fancy 5-course meal with a man I've never met before, because what if we don't get along, right? So if you know your preference or your need is a boundary around how you want to meet a man for a first date, that's something you need to set from the beginning. I've had opportunities to meet men who wanted to meet me for some crazy sounding things. Like one man wanted to take me onto a yacht because he had connections to a person who owned a yacht. He wanted to rent the whole yacht out for a first date. I said, no, let's scale it back a bit. And I had another guy who wanted to take me to the opera, to box seats at the opera. First of all, I don't like opera. Second, I had never met him. And so just saying, you know what, that sounds like a great second, third, fourth date. But for now, I would like to meet you for a short coffee date just to see if we connect. And the fifth example is a time one, and that is I will kindly end the date when it's going on too long. So knowing that you can set a boundary around time if somebody's talking on the phone too long, if you're going on a date and you want to go home, you need to set a boundary about how much time you have for that date. And you can even set that up before you meet that person. I would love to see you. I am free between this and this time. Does that work for you? So I'm going to share quick boundary scripts to have at the ready whenever you're faced with an uncomfortable situation. The first one I'm going to share is one of my favorites, and it is, I'm not comfortable with that. Can I tell you what would make me happier or what I am comfortable with? Same thing with this next one. That doesn't work for me. Can I tell you what does? So I'm not comfortable with kissing on a first date. What I am comfortable with is hugging. So usually when you set a boundary, first of all, you want to do it kindly, but you want to give the person an idea of what you will do. So it's not just what you won't do. That doesn't work for me. Can I tell you what does? Is a great way to do that. And if somebody hurts your feelings, one of my favorite boundaries is just the word ouch. You don't have to go into details, especially if you're flooded with emotion and you can't think straight. The word ouch is extremely impactful and effective. And now for step 3. Once you set those boundaries, observe how he responds. There are 2 basic responses. Number 1, pushback. If a guy pushes back and he says, like you tell him, I don't touch on a first date, and he ignores your boundary, or he starts to argue with you, he's saying that his needs are more important than yours because he's ignoring what you said. And that's a huge red flag. So pay attention. And that's why it's important to set those boundaries early, because you can see, is he going to hear you? Is he going to respect you? So the second option would be he does respect you. Maybe he apologizes because he overstepped. He's understanding that he crossed a boundary. He takes responsibility. And that's a big green flag and a green light. So you can see here that boundaries are so important. They are one of the keys to having the healthiest relationships. When you are clear about what you need and you know how to set boundaries to protect those needs, you will improve all your relationships. You will be the woman of value who finds her last first date.